The twilight hush before dawn lay over Winterfell, like a thick woolen cloak, smothering the usual sounds of a castle preparing for war. Smoke from the smithies drifted in languid whorls across the fresh fallen snow, catching the faint lamplight and turning the air green-gray, almost spectral. Only the ravens, perched restlessly along the broken battlements, seemed willing to break the quiet, their throaty clicks and soft rustles echoing off wet stone. Somewhere beyond the wall, the dead were gathering for their final march, and every living soul inside these walls felt the sky grow heavier with each passing heartbeat. Jon Snow stood atop the rampart above the old gatehouse, gloved hands curled tight around the cold granite merlon, wreath plumed silver in the air. Below him, the courtyard's torches sputtered, their flames swallowed by tiny gusts that slipped under the arch. In all the long nights he'd kept watch on the wall, he had never felt so small. Not in the face of the wild, not in the path of giants, not when staring at the endless white beyond the Frostfangs. But now, with Winterfell stones chilled to the marrow and the dead nearly at the door, the north itself seemed to recoil, as though the land feared its own memories. He heard the crunch of boots behind him and did not need to turn to know it was Davos Seaworth. The old smuggler's limp left a subtle rhythm in his steps that Jon had come to recognize. A seasick tap, then a dragging pause, as if the man still balanced against invisible waves. "Nights like this," Davos muttered, stopping just close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I almost wish I still had my ship. A quick run south, sails full, cold wind in my beard. Anything but standing here waiting for darkness to reach us." Jon let the words hang between them. Somewhere in the distant silence, a horn sounded, one sad, low note drifting from the outer trenches, answered by another and then another, each one slower, as if the sound itself grew weary. It was the signal that the scouts had sighted movement, though how much or how many no one could yet say. "We knew it would be tonight," Jon said, forcing calm into his voice. "Best we can do is hold." "Hold, Davos inhaled, as though the frigid air might steal his resolve. "But there's more at play, or so Lord Tyrion believes. He asked that I find you. Says there's something you ought to see." "No." Jon frowned. "No," he said immediately. "And I've never seen the imp's face so grave. Not even at Blackwater when the wildfire light burned half that bay," Davos answered, adjusting the collar of his cloak as if at the memory of that night south of King's Landing. "Come, he's in the crypts." The word alone unsettled Jon. Crypts, resting place of stark bones and colder secrets. The dead beneath, the dead without. Yet he followed, descending the inner stair, feet clacking over damp steps. He sensed the weight of every brittle torch shadow that danced in the hall. He passed grooms harnessing horses, no rider expected to survive the coming dawn, archers stringing longbows with trembling hands, and young girls carrying bundles of kindling to feed the braziers, though their eyes tracked every dark corner as if wraiths might slither out from the stone. In the great hall, fire crackled low in the central pit. Sansa stood before it, pale against the sudden flare of embers. Sparks mapped constellations across her fur-lined cloak. She held parchment in one hand, its edges blackened, as though the message itself had tried to flee the words contained therein. "You've heard?" Jon asked. "I've read something." Her voice was steady enough to fool most ears, but Jon heard the coil of dread within it. She turned, and for a heartbeat he remembered the girl who once chased snowflakes outside these very walls. The woman who faced him now had eyes older than her years. Tyrion claims to have uncovered part of father's old correspondence with King Aerys's pyromancer. He says there is wildfire beneath Winterfell. Nander May to Bidyodogai. Jon felt the breath leave him. Impossible. No alchemist could smuggle that much north in secret. Maybe not after Robert's rebellion, Davos said. But before. During the early days, when Ares still dreamed of strongholds, a light from the inside. Who's to say? He shook his head. Tyrion found more than letters. He found maps and barrels. Gods help us all, hidden where no torch has burned for a century. Jon studied Sansa, seeing the truth of it reflected in the tremor at the corner of her mouth. How much? Enough, she said, each syllable brittle. Enough to break Winterfell stone from stone. Enough that if the Night King's host presses in, we could ignite it and destroy them all, along with everything and everyone still within these walls. Jon's jaw tightened. Burn our own people? There must be another way. There may not be, Sansa whispered. The parchment crinkled in her grasp. The dead cannot be allowed to breach the crypts. If they do, the history of the North dies with them. The line dies. She met his gaze, unflinching. We may need to make a choice before the dawn. A log popped in the brazier, scattering sparks like tiny green embers. Jon thought he saw the flames shimmer oddly, as though reflecting ghosts only he could see. Davos cleared his throat. Tyrion waits for you in the catacombs. Best hear it from his own lips. Jon nodded once, though dread gnawed at his stomach. He motioned to Sansa. Come, we hear it together. They wound their path toward the crypt entrance, down corridors that smelled of damp earth and iron. Along the way, Bran's wheeled chair emerged from a side gallery, pushed by Mira Reed. Bran's eyes were open, unblinking, distant, seeing countless paths beyond the present hall, perhaps beyond time itself. Jon slowed, surprised that the boy, no, the three-eyed raven, was here in flesh instead of raven sight. Tyrion sends for me, Jon offered, uncertain if Bran had drifted beyond ordinary talk. I know, Bran replied, voice soft, emotionless. He found secrets buried by men who thought themselves masters of flame. The fire below dreams of freedom. He tilted his head, empty pupils reflecting torchlight. Be careful, brother. Wildfire answers to no man. It remembers only what the dragon-blooded wished for it, ruin. Before Jon could form a reply, Bran's gaze slid past him, focused on something distant or unseen. Mira guided the chair forward, gliding like a shadow across the flagstones. Jon let the chill settle on his skin, then continued downward into the crypt mouth. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of dust and ancient lichen. Torches sputtered in iron brackets, lengthening the eyes of long-dead kings and queens carved along the walls. Stone wolves crouched above them, green shadows dancing across risen hackle. They found Tyrion at the lowest tier, a cluster of unlit torches at his feet. A single lantern hung from a hook, casting jade-tinted light across his face. Beside him rested an open crate, its lid stamped with a sigil Jon did not recognize, a circle of 7 flames. Tyrion's expression bore none of his usual wry mischief. He looked up, and in that light his scars appeared deeper, almost emerald themselves. You've heard then. Saves me the trouble of rehearsing the dreadful news. He gestured to the crate. 8 more like it, nestled in alcoves behind these walls. And that, he said, pointing to a faint seam at the base of a statue's plinth, is but the first of several false walls. The Starks of old hid much. Jon crouched, fingers brushing the lid. The wood felt oddly warm, though the crypt breathed frost. Have you opened it? I pried one top loose long enough to know green fire sleeps inside. Tyrion replied, rubbing his hands against his sleeves as though to scrape off an invisible residue. It hisses in its jars, impatient as a dragon's hatchling. Davos knelt, inspecting the seal. These markings are fresh, he murmured. Someone tended them less than a year past. Couldn't have been an alchemist from the south. I'd stick out like painted mummers. Tyrion's mouth twisted. Then perhaps we have a loyalist among us who hope to finish Eris's work. Whatever their intent, the dead inadvertently discovered our doom. I sent Gendry and some of the smiths to verify the other caches. Same sigils, same quantities. So we either risk doing nothing, Jon said, and hope the dead never breach these vaults, or we detonate it ourselves. Or, Tyrion offered, we find a way to lure the Night King's vanguard above the main cache and ignite it remotely. We sacrifice the courtyard, perhaps the Great Hall, but keep the crypts and what remains of us safe. Sansa folded her arms, nails digging into her sleeves. If the blast collapses the keep, any survivors left within would be sealed alive. The underground tunnels might flood with burning chemicals. The gods would. Jon touched her arm gently. We won't decide on fear alone. Show me the maps. Tyrion produced a leather scroll and spread it atop the stone coffin nearest. Faded ink depicted Winterfell's inner walls, with crude dotted lines snaking beneath like burrowing worms. The wildfire stores. At the center, a circle shaded darker than the rest. That, Tyrion said, tapping the center, is the principal reservoir. If set alight, every smaller cache links back through capillary tunnels. A chain reaction. The dead would be caught in a storm of fire sweeping upward through trap vents carved under the courtyard. She said, how long would it burn? Davos asked. Until it consumes the castle or chokes on its own fumes, Tyrion said softly. It has no pity, no conscience. Ask Stannis' fleet. Those ships never found graves. Silence settled. Far above, a faint tremor rolled through the walls, dust drifting from the ceiling like pale snowfall. Jon felt it in his knees. The enemy's drums, the stamp of undead feet. He straightened, meeting each of their eyes. We plan for both paths. We defend these walls as though wildfire were myth. But if they breach the gate, if the courtyard falls, then we light the pyres below. The living retreat to the Godswood. Arya mapped escape routes under the glass gardens. They may hold. Sansa's throat bobbed. And if they break past faster than we flee, then in death we keep Winterfell from their grasp. His voice cracked, but he did not look away. Tyrion exhaled. I will prepare fuses. No one else must know until the time comes, else panic will rip us apart before the dead have their chance. Jon nodded agreement, though each word felt like another stone laid upon his chest. We hold until there is no holding, then we choose fire over darkness. The horns outside wailed again. 3 blasts, drawn out until the last note withered. The enemy stood at the trench. Within the ramparts, torches flared anew. Lines of soldiers moved into position, shields trembling in gloved fists. The Unsullied took the forward parapet, spears angled outward like a silver forest under gloom. The Dothraki riders paced restlessly behind, curved arcs catching stray moonlight. Above them atop the rookery tower, a great drake silhouette unfurled. Drogon settling his massive wings, black scales merging with storm clouds. Daenerys Targaryen stood beside him on the platform, cloak snapping in the wind. Her eyes glowed with near feral purpose. The snow that fell upon her melted instantly against the quiet heat, radiating from her dragon's body, leaving steam swirling around them like phantom mist. Jon hurried back up the stairs, reaching the top rampart as Grey Worm barked orders down the line. Daenerys turned at Jon's approach, reading his face at once. Bad news. He looked briefly at the roiling darkness beyond the trenches, then at the Queen. There's wildfire buried beneath the keep, enough to destroy Winterfell outright if triggered. Her brows drew together, but the wind swept her silver gold hair free. How? Planted by Aerys alchemists before Robert's rebellion. Tyrion discovered it only now. If the Night King breaks through, we may have to ignite it. Daenerys' gaze flicked toward the stone towers she had come to cherish these last short weeks. Fire is mine to wield, not to fear. If it must burn, let it burn at my command. Jon wanted to take her hands, to share warmth that had little to do with dragons, but the clang of hammer on gong cut the thought short. The trench watch signaled. The dead were filing into the fire moat, tumbling over themselves, extinguishing flames with their own frozen shells. The first whites pressed against the outer stakes, steam rising where cold flesh met smoldering wood. Arrows loosed from parapets, flaming orbs arced downward. Still they came, white eyes, jagged bones under decayed skin, drawn forward by the silent will that stalked behind them. Jon slipped ghost's fur along his shoulders, lifted long claw. He felt the old steel ache with expectation, and somewhere beneath his boots, under fathoms of stone, wildfire stirred in its glass wounds, eager for release. Hours bled together like melting ice. The living pushed the dead back from the walls, lost ground, regained it, lost again. Shouts echoed until throats ran raw, until men could only whisper prayers through cracked lips. Snow turned gray, then red, then black. The heat of battle rose so fierce it melted frost where bodies piled high. From the godswood's edge, Arya stalked the shadowed paths between weirwood roots, blade flashing silent in moonlight. She severed tendon and spine alike, moving like a soft sigh across the carnage. Though each time she paused, she glanced toward the crypt entrance, as if sensing the greater peril below. In the courtyard, Rian of Tarth held a fractured shield in one hand, Oathkeeper in the other, standing astride Jaime Lannister, who knelt beside her, blade shattered at the hilt. Together, they carved a circle of survival, each blow cost in sweat and blood. But for every wight they felled, two more climbed the ramp or leapt from broken scaffolds. Grey Worm's spear found the throat of a giant wight, but the unsullied commander lost his footing on ice slick with gore. He would have died had not Gendry smashed the creature's kneecap with a hammer strike that cracked bone like dry wood. Two locked eyes briefly, gratitude shared, before turning to the next horror. High above, Drogon unleashed gouts of crimson flame, carving swaths through the dead. Rhaegal joined him, though his breath came ragged from an earlier spear wound. Somewhere beyond the clouds, Viserion's screech shattered the sky, blue-white fire raining over the left flank, leaving nothing but twisted spires of frost-blackened stone. Jon watched with dawning horror. Viserion's breath iced the rampart's base, and the wall groaned as cracks spidered across its face. He shouted orders, but the roar of dragons drowned his voice. Stone crumbled. A segment of parapet collapsed inward, burying men and women beneath shards of granite and timber. That moment, the first rank of wights reached the inner yard. They clambered over fallen masonry, surged toward the east gate. The line faltered. Jon felt the tide shift, the castle's heart shudder. From the crypt entrance, a plume of green-tinged smoke curled up, not flame, but the faintest sigh of vapor escaping through new-formed fissures. Jon's blood chilled colder than any night wind. Wildfire breaths. He met Davos' eyes across the chaos. The Onion Knight gave a subtle nod. The choice was upon them. Jon sprinted down the nearest stair, leaping 2 steps at a time. He shouted for the living to fall back toward the godswood. Retreat. Inner yard lost. His voice cracked but caught on lips, carried by terror more than command. He spotted Samwell Tarly ushering women and children toward an old postern door. Jon seized him by the shoulder. Get them through the glass gardens. Don't wait. Sam nodded, wiping blood, his or another's, from his cheek. And you? I'll find Sansa, then Davos. He hesitated, looked back at the courtyard inferno. Tell Bran, tell him it's time. Sam's eyes widened with recognition, but he only squeezed Jon's arm once and ran. Jon plunged toward the crypt steps. The air grew hotter, though no flame yet showed. At the threshold, he nearly collided with Tyrion, who coughed violently, eyes watering from the acrid haze wafting up the passage. "It's begun," Tyrion rasped. "Glass cracked on 2 barrels when the wall fell. We may have minutes, no more. Can we control it? Perhaps delay with water, but one spark, one torch drop." Tyrion shook his head. "Best we set it ourselves, on our terms." Footsteps clattered behind them. Sansa, carrying a small hessian pouch bound with twine. Her face was streaked with soot, but her voice rang clear. "The children are gone. Maester's guiding them through the vegetable tunnels. We decide now." The ground vibrated, subtle, like the hum of a distant drum, wildfire straining against glass. Jon swallowed the taste of copper. "Davos is preparing the god's wood," he said. "We must light the vents near the old weirwood stump. Draw the dead in, then spark it, and hope the blast flows upward, not outward," Tyrion added. "Pray to whichever gods might listen." Sansa's fingers tightened on the pouch. "Or to our ancestors," she whispered. Jon looked at her then, at the unspoken fear behind the steel. He wanted to promise life, promise dawn, promise everything, but the lie felt too brittle to voice. So he only nodded. "We make our stand." They turned. Above ground, the night had become a pit of nightmare. Whites flooded through the breach, gnawing at flesh, clawing at walls, unstoppable. Grey worms' unsullied ranks lay shattered. Brienne and Jaime fought back to back, silhouettes flickering in random bursts of dragonflame. But farther east, the first pale warriors slipped into the broken doorway leading down to the crypt. Davos appeared at Jon's side, one eye swollen shut, cloak half burned. "God's wood secured. Archers, living and dead alike, won't reach it before the blast if we hurry." Tyrion thrust a fuse of pitch-soaked rope into Davos' hand. "Light this at the last possible moment. We need the dead inside the kill zone." Davos smirked grimly. "I remember wildfire tricks from Blackwater, Impy. Let's hope the North's crust holds better than the King's Road quay." Together they advanced toward the mouth where crypt met courtyard ruin. First White spilled through, a lanky corpse with half its skull crushed, eyes blazing blue. Jon severed its neck with a single swing, body falling limp at his feet. More shuffled behind. He and Davos retreated step by step, luring them beneath sagging archways. Sansa, meanwhile, disappeared along a side passage, threading through hidden doors known only to the Stark line. She emerged in the Godswood moments later, heart racing, to find Bran waiting under the ancient weirwood. Snow drooped from its red leaves like silent tears. "They've decided?" Bran asked. Her breath came in white puffs. "Yes." His gaze turned skyward, milky pupils reflecting stars she could not see. "So it was always meant." He closed his eyes. "Tell Jon, remember me when the world grows quiet again." Then sunken eyes reopened, glimmering with 1,000 ages. "Go." Sansa pressed a kiss to his cheek and fled, tears freezing on her lashes. Jon and Davos reached the final bend before the subterranean reservoir, a cavern carved beneath the old stone square. Wildfire fumes hung thick, luminescent motes swirling like fireflies lost in a storm. Broken jars lined the floor, liquid pooling, reflecting eerie green light. Dead men poured after them, skeletal hands stretching. Jon swung, long claw breaking bone. Davos' dagger flashed, and he hurled a torch into a side tunnel, drawing the whites after its flicker. Tyrion called from behind a support pillar. Fuse set. Jon backed into the alcove where Davos knelt, tying rope to an iron sconce. The fuse snaked back through winding passages toward the vent shafts above the main store. When lit, it would race downward, ignite the central deposit. and from there surge outward. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. From the darkness emerged the Night King himself, ice spear in hand, crystalline armor gleaming green in the wildfire's glow. Blue gaze fixed upon John with chilling certainty. Davos whispered, "Light it now." Joan's flint sparked. The fuse hissed to life. At that same instant, the Night King hurled his spear. John ducked, the shaft grazing his shoulder and burying into the wall behind with a ringing crack. Stone fractured, shards tumbled, smashing open 2 more wildfire jars. Green liquid splashed, igniting where it met flame dripping from the torch's stub. A roar of chemical fire surged upward, heat slamming them back. John grabbed Davos, hauling him toward the escape passage. Tyrion scrambled ahead, half running, half crawling. Behind them, the Night King stepped through the newborn flames, unscathed. Frost blooming where he walked, wildfire recoiling with a hiss. The fuse sped along the carved groove, sparks chasing oil. Above, in the courtyard, vents belched emerald smoke. John burst into the godswood, lungs scalded, clothes smoldering. Sansa raced to him, clutching his arm. "The children reached the forest," she shouted over the rising wind. Arya and Gendry are with them. A tremor shook the ground. Davos, face ash-smeared, lifted weary eyes. "Get behind the weirwood. Down!" He shoved Sansa aside as a fissure split the paving stones. Then came the roar. Wildfire erupted from the courtyard with the force of a dragon's wrath. Towers shattered, stones hurled skyward. A geyser of emerald fire clawed into the night, lighting the battlefield brighter than noon. The shockwave hammered through the godswood, tearing limbs from trees, flinging snow in molten plumes. Jon shielded Sansa with his body as flaming debris rained. Across the yard, Brienne and Jaime vanished behind a curtain of green flame. Drogon swept overhead, wings buffeted by the blast. Flame followed the veins beneath Winterfell, rising through vent after vent, consuming galleries, kitchens, armories. The courtyard became a cauldron, dead and living alike engulfed. Stone groaned, walls sagged inward. Yet the godswood, protected by ancient root and magic older than men, held, though branches nearest the blast blackened and snapped. The Night King emerged from the center of the inferno, cloak of flame, yet not burning. Frost spread before each step, quenching smaller fires. But the main torrent roared, unabated. Somewhere in that tide, Bran's face flickered behind the weirwood's bleeding eyes, and the Night King paused, as though hearing a call from another realm. Jon rose, pain lancing his ribs. Longclaw lay half buried in ash. He staggered, found the sword, met the Night King's gaze across a chasm of swirling fire. Between them stood the heart tree, carved face weeping sap like red tears. Wind screamed through the shattered keep. Sparks soared heavenward, as though the very souls of Winterfell took flight. Snow melted, then flashed to vapor, fogging the air with steam that glowed emerald and rose. Field of Death was now a sea of fire, and over the roar, the first stones of Winterfell's inner wall began to crumble, falling one by one with a slow, monumental finality. In the far pine woods, beyond the outer moat, Arya knelt among frightened children and old folk, watching green light bathe the sky. She held a dagger slick with shadow, trembling not from cold, but from helpless witness. Her breath caught as each tower silhouette folded into the flame. Somewhere within that light, her family fought on. Jon, Sansa, Bran may be gone already, and she could do nothing but watch. Gendry stood behind her, arm around her shoulders, whispering truths neither wanted to believe. To their right, Sam held Gilly close, eyes watering from smoke that could not have reached this far. And still, beyond all reason, Drogon circled, black wings slicing through emerald haze. His roar was grief and fury combined, the voice of an old god shattering. Back at the Godswood, the shock waves slowed, but the wildfire burned deeper now, tunneling downward to Heart Rock. John felt heat radiate through his boots. He locked eyes with the Night King across the crimson-sapped tree. The enemy raised a pale hand, frost forming on twisted bark. Ice crept along the carved face, sealing tears in crystalline prisons. In that moment, Bran spoke through the ravens, ringing the tree. Their cause unison, their eyes black mirrors reflecting segmented scenes of time. Choice remakes the world. John stepped forward, Longclaw gleaming an echo of Wildfire's hue. Sansa clutched his cloak. John, no. He released her hand gently, then approached the Night King. Flames licked at his back, winter wind at his face, the balancing forces of their world, life and death, fire and ice, meeting in one heartbeat under the ancient tree. He lifted his sword. The Night King opened frost-blue fingers. Between them, wildfire pulsed under stone, seeking sky. Frost crawled down weirwood roots, seeking earth. The Godswood became the fulcrum upon which destiny balanced. Fire howling upward, ice spiraling downward. And Jon Snow, son of Rhaegar, and Lyanna, chosen by both flame and frost, prepared to decide which would claim Winterfell's dying heart. The sky beyond Winterfell's ragged crown churned with dragons, smoke, and distant thunder, the night alive with emerald ghosts. The dead screams mingled with wildfire's roar, echoing across snowfields now stained a sickly green. Yet, in the forest's hush, the children still breathed, the living still hoped, and somewhere beneath the roaring heavens, the sword made of Valyrian star steel hovered at the tipping point of all stories. The tale held its breath, suspended on that narrow blade, as time slowed to a final, fragile heart. John drew a breath so hot it scorched his lungs, yet the night air stabbed just as sharply with a needle's ice chill. Every nerve felt split between blister and frostbite, as though his very blood had been hammered into razor edges. Longclaw vibrated against his palm, an iron tuning fork struck by impossible forces. Behind him, wildfire geysers still raged through shattered stone. Before him, the Night King stood silent. Silver's spear laid across an open hand, thin lips curved in the faintest hint of mockery. Why? Yeah. Jon's first step carried him over roots that steamed where wildfire droplets hissed away. The bark scorched black on one side, crystallized white on the other. Sap bubbled like liquid rubies, pooling beneath the weirwood's face. The sword in his grip seemed to drink the hellish light and pass it along the blade until the direwolf pommel looked carved of some molten gemstone. He heard nothing of the battle now. No screams, no clamor. Only the frantic hammer of his harp. Yet behind that thrum, another rhythm pulsed. The fuse beat of wildfire tunneling deeper, seeking veins of trapped air, hunting the next convulsion that could erase them all. The Night King tilted his head as though listening too, those infinite blue eyes sparking with patient contempt. With a movement fluid as falling snow, he raised his spear, reversed the grip, and drove the butt against frozen earth. A tremor rippled outward, fissures chasing through frost and ash toward Jon's boots. Jon shifted weight, narrowing stance, sliding Longclaw into guard position, but the ground merely cracked and stilled, leaving crystalline shards glittering beneath green glow. It was not an attack. It was punctuation. Your move. Jon inhaled again, felt ribs protest, and advanced another pace. Flames licked his cloak hem, igniting rogue threads. He shrugged the garment loose, sending it spinning away in a plume of embers. Beneath, his leather jerkin steamed, water from melted snow evaporating in quick spits. He registered it dimly, his focus tunneled to the glacial aura enveloping the figure before him. Yard by yard, the contradiction sharpened. Wildfire's furnace heat crushing against winter's absolute null. At center, he recognized dread's true form. Not fear of death, but certainty that both forces meant obliteration of all memory, all love, all promise. He spoke, voice hoarse. You want the darkness to swallow the 7 kingdoms. You think fire will do it for you. Words tasted like iron filings on his tongue. But Winterfell chooses its own fate. The Night King's response was not speech, but a ripple in the air. He stepped forward, spear tip lowered. Jon noted how no flame dared touch the being. Wildfire streams diverted, curving like serpents recoiling from a charmed flute. The old stories had said wildfire was blind, caring only for flesh and wood. But here it feared a colder master. Jon moved first. Long claws slashed in a short diagonal meant to test distance. The Night King countered with a mere twist of his wrist. The spear's shaft, ice yet unmelting, caught Valyrian steel. A chime rang out, and the shock numbed Jon's fingers halfway to the elbow. He recovered, pivoted, struck again. Steel kissed ice, sparks and frost mixing midair, each contact binding a fragment of his strength to the clammy void radiating from the foe. 2 exchanges, 3. Then Jon feinted low, reversed overhead. The tip nicked crystalline armor, shaving slivers off that drifted like starlight, but drew no dark blood beneath. Pain shot through his right knee. Fracture lines in stone had erupted under wildfire pressure, tossing up a rim of jagged rubble. Jon staggered. The Night King slid in, spear whistling. Jon barely caught the blow on Longclaw's flat, yet momentum drove him backward into the ancient trunk. Weirwood bark cracked behind his shoulder blades. Sap splattered across his cheeks, warm, sticky, strangely humming. In that moment, Bran's voice filled his head, soft and distant, yet unmistakable. Hold the balance. Do not let one swallow the other. The song must have both notes. Jon gritted his teeth. He ducked, letting the next spear thrust bury into the heart tree. The wood shrieked like a living creature. Red sap gushed, splattering the Night King's pale visage. Instantly the frost about him recoiled, sizzling upon contact with the warm blood of the old gods. Steam billowed. The Night King snapped the spear free, but Jon was already rolling clear. Longclaw sweeping upward to cleave at an exposed gauntlet. Steel bit, shards flew, and the being's fingers scattered across snow like blue glass beads. A hiss, still no scream, escaped those thin lips. The severed digits sublimated into hoarfrost before touching earth. Across the godswood, Davos shouted Jon's name. Sansa, half hidden behind a split oak trunk, cried out as another quake shook the hillock. Sections of keep continued to implode, sending plumes of emerald flame higher than the tallest tower had once stood. One explosion sent a shockwave that toppled the statue of Lyanna Stark. Outside the crypt entrance, stones cartwheeling down slope. Dust rolled into the grove, dimming the supernatural glow. A flock of burning ravens erupted skyward, wings of fire scattering like meteors. Jon advanced again. His breath came ragged, a roar in ears. Each step felt like wading through 2 worlds' gravity. The Night King's spear half-reformed a new blade at its end, ice knitting with eerie speed. He lunged, but Jon parried tighter now, using shorter beats, feeling sap drying tacky on his face, realizing the tree's blood coated his blade as well. Valyrian steel wreathed in old magic, maybe enough. The combat compressed into a circle only 8 feet wide. The shadow of the heart tree canopy swirled around them. On one side, wildfire illumination dancing emerald wolves across branching vales. On the other, ice-rank mist swirling with ghostly, weird shadows. Each weapon left contrails through the melee. Longclaw a shard of molten night, the spear a comet of moonlit razor. Sparks and snowflakes collided midair, birthing a storm of crackling puffs that smelled of pine resin and scorched copper. Jon faintly sensed footsteps behind him. Arya's lithe silhouette plunged from a broken branch above Cat's Island. She landed upon a rock spur behind the Night King, dagger of dragonglass poised. But as she lunged, the enemy turned as if prophecy whispered in his ear, back elbowing her throat with such force, she crumpled mid-air. Her weapon skittered off, lost under snow turned to slush. Jon's cry distracted the Night King for half a blink. Enough. He pivoted, slid under the spear, slicing an arc across chestplate. Armor cracked. A thin fracture propagated downward, glowing azure. The Night King responded with a palm strike that launched Jon bodily into open air. He slammed against a toppled column of statuary, felt ribs crack. Longclaw flew from his grasp, embedding 15 feet away in a stun. Jon rolled, coughed blood, forced eyes open. Courtyard beyond the Godswood had become a volcanic crater. Flames licked clouds, masonry rained like hail. Somewhere in that inferno, Brienne still shouted commands. He heard her voice even now, hoarse but defiant. Dragons roared above, but their silhouettes wavered through smoke. He could not tell if friend or foe survived. The Night King strode toward Arya's crumpled form, spear raised for the killing thrust. Jon tried to rise. His left leg betrayed him. Davos' voice cracked again from behind a tomb slab. "Use the fire, lad." He hurled something, Sansa's torn pouch, across the space. It tumbled, scattering small clay spheres. Wildfire pots, hastily rigged by Tyrion as grenades. They clacked on stone near Jon's hand. He seized one, the surface clogged with sticky pitch and a thumb-sized fuse coated in tar. But was no flame within reach. The nearest torch lay 20 feet behind the Night King. Jon's gaze snagged on the tree again. Sap trickled along a splintered root, sizzling where it touched stray wildfire droplets, igniting small, flickering strands of yellow-green flame that licked upward like questing tongues. He dragged himself toward it, body screaming. He dipped the pot's fuse into the sapphire. It sputtered, then bloomed, hissed bright. The Night King's arm rose above Arya. Jon hurled the grenade with everything left in him. Time slowed. Wildfire pot arced, spinning sparks. The Night King sensed it. He pivoted, spear intercepting. The heavy clay struck the blade, shattered. Green liquid splashed across both combatants, mostly onto the Night King's torso, but spattering Jon's chest too. Flame blossomed instantaneously, climbing blue-white armor plates, wreathing the being in hellish robes. Jon felt spots of fire bite his jerkin. He slapped them out, rolled aside as a plume whooshed skyward. For the first time, the Night King made sound, an almost silent gasp, more the absence of stillness than a scream. Frost exploded outward as defense. Ice crystals formed a cocoon, seeking to extinguish flames. Fire and ice entangled, erupting steams that boiled then refroze midair into glittering sleet. Arya stirred, coughing. Jon crawled to her, pulled her clear. He pressed Longclaw's pommel into her palm. She looked startled, but accepted, hands closing around the great sword, despite its size. Jon staggered to his feet, retrieved the dragonglass dagger she'd lost. A thought pierced the haze. 2 blades forged for 2 bloods. He extended the dagger to her as well, but she shook her head, indicating his own hand, then gestured at the heart tree. In her gray steel eyes burned plan beyond words. Together, they turned back toward the Night King. He knelt now, engulfed in swirling nebulae of steam and flame. A statue caught in a blast furnace, but the fire's fury wavered. Shimmering layers of frost cocooned more surface each second. Soon, the blaze would choke. Jon sensed deeper rumble beneath earth, wildfire chains still spreading. If they did not finish him before the next reservoir blew, even Godswood might vanish. He met Arya's eyes again. She pointed at the fracture in the Night King's chestplate. Jon understood. Knew what was it. With agony screaming through ruined ribs and scorched skin, Jon sprinted, dagger low. Arya sprinted opposite, longclaw raised. They wove crossed patterns, feints reminiscent of Braavosi water dance, but heavier. The Night King surged upright, frost aura flaring, spear haft regrowing second blade, so both ends glinted like crescent moons. He whirled twin arcs. Jon ducked beneath first. Arya parried second with Valyrian steel, sparks cascading. She locked spear half a heartbeat, enough for Jon to dive under locked arms, bury dragonglass into the fracture. Tip pierced armor. Crack widened. Blue light shot out, brilliant enough to blind. The Night King seized Jon's wrist in bone-cold claw. Flesh burned numb instantly. Jon screamed, but rammed dagger deeper. Arya, shouting wordless fury, cleaved with long claw across the clasping arm. The limb severed. Jon toppled aside. Blue light pulsed again, this time stuttering like a faltering star. Cracks spidered across icy chest. From somewhere behind, Davos flung another wildfire pot. It shattered at the Night King's feet. Flames surged anew, diving into open fissures. The blue light flickered, sputtered, then collapsed inward as though sucked by vacuum. The spear ends shattered, shards whirling outward. Ice Viking stumbled, knee buckling. Arya flipped Longclaw into reverse grip, leapt, and drove the sword down through Crown's skull like a wrought iron thunderbolt. Splintering crack traveled the length of the being. He froze in place, a sculpture half fire, half frost. Webs of green and sapphire energies snared mid-struggle. Then he simply burst, exploding into a million shards of hoarfrost that instantly vaporized in the wildfire glare. Silence fell as if the world itself gasped, but depth quakes rolled beneath them again. Jon stared at the hole, gaping where the Night King had stood. The wildfire inside Winterfell had not been owned by that death. It rolled onward, hungry, blind. Flames still erupted from tunnels. Another vent beside the broken crypt, mouth glowed, bulging. Arya clutched Jon. "We need Bran," she said, voice raw. Jon nodded, scanning, smoking grove. Among toppled trunks, white roots, and charred leaf litter, Bran's chair remained near the weirwood face, empty. Ravens circled overhead, but of Bran himself, no sign. The screech overhead, Viserion convulsed mid-flight, blue-white flames sputtering from jaws. Without the Night King's will, the undead dragon spiraled erratic, crashing onto the east courtyard, body-fracturing stone quays already molten from earlier blasts. Drogon, sensing weakness, dove, orange inferno gust, bursting full into Viserion's chest. The ice-corrupted beast disintegrated, shards raining. The living cheered faintly from pockmarked walls, but their shouts were drowned by new booms. From a deeper vault near the old well, a series of 3 muted thuds detonated. Whomp, whomp, whomp. The ground liquefied below their boots. The god's wood floor sank inches, roots popping free. Jon realized next reservoir had ignited far below. Chain reaction, unstoppable. Arya shouted at Sansa across splintered ground. "To the crypt tunnels!" Sansa waved survivors, Davos, Brienne, limping but alive, Gendry carrying a wounded grey worm, Sam dragging Podrick Payne. Others followed, battered shadows under green starlight. They converged toward a low arch hidden behind winter roses. Bronn's planned escape path. But Jon's gaze locked on the weirwood. Sap still bled, though the carved face looked calmer, eyes half-lidded as if sleeping after colossal effort. Something tugged inside him. Memory of Bran's warning. Hold the balance. If the wildfire took full hold, nothing would remain of old magic. nor roots to cradle the future. He thought of old Nan's stories, how heart trees alone could weave man's memory into world, destroy it utterly, and centuries might drift unanchored. He turned to Davos. Can we stop the chain? I doubt. Davos wheezed, clutching cracked ribs. But we can divert maybe. Open vent shafts, release pressure upward away from roots. John nodded. Arya pressed Longclaw's hilt back to him. Go, she said. I'll shepherd the others. Their glances exchanged the truth. Whichever path each chose, they might not meet again. He squeezed her shoulder, turned. The stonecutter's hammer lay broken by a splintered barrel of tar. John zeised its head, tore cloth from fallen banner, wrapped into makeshift torch. He rekindled cloth at a smoldering branch, then plunged into vent maintenance tunnels Bran had mapped weeks earlier. Passageways smoked thick, heat unbearable. He crawled, hacking. Above him faint clangs. Davos with a handful of unsullied pride grates. John passed cavern after cavern of collapsed racks where warped jars dripped residue into sizzling pools. Yet, through cracks, he saw root tendrils from Hearttree, pushing between stones, glowing faintly red with residual sap. They must not burn. He reached a junction where two conduits merged. Ahead, a natural vent shaft rose like a chimney toward open sky. Its capstone, once sealed with mortar, had cracked in earlier explosions, but debris blocked most exhausts. John clawed at stones, braced back against opposite wall, heaved. One slab shifted, fell rattling down ladder rungs, leaving gap. Superheated gas screamed upward, his torch snuffed, but he glimpsed clear night above swirling with ash and sparks. The roar intensified, pressure relieved. He scrambled to next cap, repeating. Each opening vented hellfire like dragon throats, but away from root bed. Still the ground convulsed with aftershocks. Reaching last station, John found iron lever fused by heat. He smashed it with hammerhead. Metal bent, mechanism gave, grate popped. A blast of green-gold flame chased him back, singing hair. He tumbled, coughed, but felt air currents shift. Maybe enough. Footsteps echoed. Davos emerged from cross passage, face blackened. Root spared for now, he croaked. But Heap's north flank collapsing. We must quit. They staggered through smoke toward exit ramp, branched into a seldom used cold chute. Halfway, a fissure exploded, ejected stone and burning pitch. Debris crushed Davos' leg. He roared, collapse. John tried to lift beam, but muscles failed. Davos gripped his forearm. Leave me. Stark blood must carry tale. John refused, straining anew. With a howl, he shifted beam just enough, hauling Davos free. They limped together into moonlit courtyard, now half-leveled. Flames continued, but with less fury. The worst reservoirs had spent themselves. Dragons no longer encircled. Drogon perched atop distant ridge, regal gliding wounded to rest beyond walls. Whites left standing had fallen inert, lifeless corpses withered. At Godswood perimeter, Sansa and Arya waited with cluster of survivors near Hidden Gate. Bran stood among them, not in chair but upright, leaning on queer wooden staff root carved from Hearttree itself. His eyes glimmered green, not distant now but present. He raised a hand. As Jon and Davos approached, roots behind him breached soil, sprouting delicate winter roses tinted faintly emerald by reflected firelight. Life pushing back. Bran spoke, voice both boy and storm. Balance held. Fire has purged, but heart endures. The North lives. Jon dropped to knees, exhausted. Sansa knelt beside, wiping ash from his brow. Arya handed him a water skin. He drank, water tasting of iron and smoke. Grey Worm, propped on Gendry's shoulder, surveyed ruins. Enemies gone. His voice rasped softly. But castle lost, Brienne answered. One arm around Jaime. Castles can be rebuilt. She glanced at Bran. Lives cannot. At horizon, first glimmer of true dawn breached smoke veil, turning clouds lavender and gold. Wildfire still flared in deep pits, but slowly dimming, starved of fuel. Snowflakes fluttered again, hissing on hot stone, birthing steam rising like incense from shattered battlements. Winterfell had become a shattered crown, but beneath debris, the gods' wood breathed. Jon rose, looked east where Night King's shards had melted into dew. He felt strange hollow. Victory laced with mourning, so many lost in crimson-green blaze. Yet here, among sisters and friends, he sensed future's fragile sea. Bran's gaze fixed on horizon. The long night ended not with blade alone, nor with fire alone, but with both defying extinction. Remember that. His eyes dimmed to normal brown. He sagged, Mira Reed rushing to support. Arya rested Longclaw's tip in ruined soil, expression fierce but uncertain. So what now? Jon studied the courtyard. In center, Wildfire crater cooled, leaving glassy basin reflecting dawn. He answered quietly, "Now we bury the dead, heal the wounded, and guard this spark until spring." Above them ravens wheeled, unburned now, cawing like heralds of unfinished stories. Jon tilted face to sky, let snow kiss burned skin, and thought of songs still unwritten, songs of fire that did not conquer, ice that did not chain, and people who stood between to keep the world turning. Yet far beneath the shattered keep, in a pocket of unspent wildfire, a lone jar remained intact, glowing gently, a slumbering dragon. Its green heart pulsed once, then fell quiet, waiting for whatever tale came next. Yee. Jon woke when the pale sun barely cleared the skeletal remains of the east tower, its early light refracting through whorls of steam that drifted upward from charred stones. He had been sitting against a leaning wall stub, head slumped over an arm strapped tight across splinted ribs, but exhaustion had drowned pain, long enough for sleep to creep through. A raven cawed somewhere among the half-leafless branches overhead. Its echo brought him back to Winterfell's ruins, and to the smell, ashes, damp earth, burning pine pitch, old blood, and somewhere beneath it, the faint, alchemical tang of spent wildfire. He uncurled stiff fingers, flexed them until circulation returned in prickling waves, and pushed aside the sooty blanket Arya must have draped over him. Every motion reminded him of bruises layered like maps beneath his skin, but the castle lay quiet for the moment. No wights, no screaming, no thunder of collapsing stone. Only distant voices. The clank of a bucket, and the low rumble of Drogon where he lay coiled beside the godswood like an enormous guard hound, snoring after an impossible night. Jon rose to his feet and took the first careful steps across flagstones, now warped into black-green glass. Where molten wildfire had once flowed, the surface had hardened into eerie ripples that caught daylight in sickly glints. Here and there, flakes of snow lay upon the glass, already melting into tiny rivulets that hissed in hairline cracks. He passed under what remained of the covered walkway, and then through an archway that had lost its keystone, but still clung to form by the stubbornness of mortar. Beyond, the great courtyard was a study in gradients of ruin. Outer edges merely scorched, middling zones carpeted in ash, and the central crater glazed like a black mirror. A small company of remaining unsullied stood in 2 rows along the safer fringe, helms doffed, spears grounded in silent vigil, while several Northmen dragged bodies, human and inhuman alike, onto makeshift litters. They moved with solemn efficiency, pausing to bow heads each time they lifted a fallen comrade. Grey Worm directed the grisly inventory from a wooden stool. One arm was bound tight to his torso, The other, still serviceable, rested across his thigh, holding a short list scrawled by Maester Wolken. 2 tattooed Nazi healers dabbed ointment across the raw scar at his shoulder, but he did not flinch. When John approached, Grey Worm inclined his head fractionally, mutual acknowledgement without ceremony. "How many?" John asked. 312 living, who can still stand," Grey Worm answered, voice hoarse but steady. 74 who may live if they reach healers soon. The rest. He gestured to the rows of bodies, shrouded in blankets, reinforced by strips of shield leather. "We count 800 dead inside the walls. Hard to say how many burned beyond." John exhaled through clenched teeth. The combined host of Northmen, wildlings, unsullied, Dothraki, freefolk, and Vale archers had numbered more than 15,000 before the battle. What remained would scarcely man the wall of old, let alone 2 realms. "Dragons," he said, though he could see Drogon's silhouette and Rhaegal's crumpled form not far from the inner rampart. "Rhaegal lives," Grey Worm said. "Broken wing, spear wounds through the left lung. He cannot fly until healed. Drogon is whole but tired, restless." He looked toward the godswood where black-scaled ridges rose above tree trunks. "He guards the boy, your brother." John followed the gaze. The heart tree still stood, though several of its lower limbs had charred. The place where the Night King's spear had pierced trunk remained a gaping wound, but the sap blood had crusted into a dark scab, while tender shoots of new leaves sprouted improbably along the fractured margins. Beneath, Bran reclined against a pillow of fresh moss, eyes closed, the carved staff laid over knees, like a rod of authority. Mira Reed knelt near him, grinding dried fireweed into poultice, and the ravens perched above watched all who came and went. John thanked Grey Worm, then walked toward that quiet island of red and white and green. As he approached, the ravens shifted but did not flee. A few gave low clicks of greeting. Bran's lids opened before John reached the clearing, as though he had heard every crunch of John's boots through the thaw. "You should rest longer," Bran said, his voice calm but edged with fatigue of cosmic dimension. "Lighter tur," John replied. "I need to know the cost." He sank to a sit opposite his brother among the roots, wincing. "And the future? What did we truly end last night?" Bran's gaze drifted to the glistening bark wound. "The long night born of one man's. Grief and vengeance is over. The force that moved the dead is dispersed, spread thin into the winds, into the cracks of the world where it can harm no whole people again." "None count." Nizid jumped. John frowned. "But cold remains. Winter still comes." "Winter is a season," Bran answered. "What stalked us was a will." He closed eyes briefly. The flame and the frost still exist within every creature, but without a single mind to knit them into armies. John considered that comfort, but not certainty. Then he recalled the single surviving jar buried beneath. Bran's head tilted, as if reading thought. "The wildfire egg," he said. "You saw it?" John asked. "I held it, a heartbeat of fire that refused extinction. It lies deep under collapsed granaries, beyond ordinary reach." He smoothed hand along staff. "Someday a king or queen might dig too greedily and find it, and the cycle would turn again. Or someone might guard it, as dragons guard their eggs, mindful of promise and peril." John recognized the challenge in those words. "You think we should recover it? I think we must decide whether knowledge of such power is safer hidden or destroyed," Bran replied. "Either way, it cannot remain forgotten, ripe for half-mad seekers." "We'll speak with Daenerys," John said. "You should speak also with Sansa," Bran added, "and with Arya, and the lords who will gather. Trust is scarce." John nodded. Political aftershocks were inevitable. Half the North had never warmed to a dragon queen. Others doubted any Targaryen's right, even after her dragons had saved them. Meanwhile, Unsullied, demanded justice for the many lost. He rubbed forehead. Where is the queen now? On the rampart that still stands, Mira answered softly. She has not come down since dawn. Tyrion stands with her. Bed to bed. Jon thanked them, then rose, winding through overturned statues toward the rampart's remnant. A narrow walkway forming a crescent around the south side, still intact due to thicker buttressing. Charred banners drooped from spar poles. He saw Daenerys' silver-gold braid in profile, fluttering in sharp spring breeze. Tyrion beside her held parchment rolls, gesturing across map of charred courtyard. Unsullied guards formed discreet cordon. When Jon stepped onto the walkway, Daenerys' shoulders straightened. She turned, expression weary but alert. Her violet eyes looked slightly reddened, whether from smoke or tears he could not know. Jon, she said. Is Rhaegal? He'll live, Jon replied. Master Vulcan, already mixing potions. He stopped 2 paces away. Tyrion gave a small bow and withdrew to examine a cracked merlon, granting privacy. Daenerys studied Jon's bandaged ribs. You fought even after fire consumed half the keep. Couldn't stand aside, he said. Wind caught his coat. He shivered. But now another fight begins. He explained what Bran sensed, the surviving jar, the decision to find or destroy it. Daenerys listened, brow furrowing. Wildfire built to kill cities, she muttered. My family once hoarded it like treasure, thinking themselves dragons even without scales. It nearly destroyed King's Landing in Aerys' last madness. She turned gaze to courtyard. I would see it gone. Tyrion approached again. If we dig, we risk triggering pockets of residue. Work must be careful, slow. And there's still the question of who holds it once brought above ground. Daenerys looked to Jon. I would entrust it to the north. That surprised both men. She elaborated. Let the Starks hide what remains in their crypts, or cast it into the sea of ice. The south has no claim. I wish no more bloodfire. Jon inclined head. The lords may accept if they believe your word. Tyrion cleared throat. Which brings us to the next matter. He unrolled parchment, showing a roster. Supplies. Winterfell's granaries gone. Fields salted by flame. We must move survivors either to Deepwood Motte or White Harbor before full winter. But roads are broken, bridges burnt. He sighed. We must ask alliances of houses that once fought you. Daenerys reached to squeeze Tyrion's forearm. Then I ride Drogon to them as friend not conqueror. Let them see ruins and know the price we paid to save them. Jon nodded approval. But you need escort. The North trusts its own more than dragons. Then come with me, she said. Show them we stand together. He hesitated, recalling Sansa's wary eyes. Yet he said, aye, for without unity, tomorrow's storms would finish what undead could not. That afternoon, ravens flew bearing scrolls, invitations to a council at Winterfell in 5 days' time, signed by Queen Daenerys Stormborn and Lord Commander Jon Snow, acting as Warden of the North until brands will be known. Messages bore twin seals, dragon and direwolf fused in wax. Whether the realms would honor summons, none knew. 3 days passed in tireless labor. By dawn of the 2nd day, smoke stopped rising from vents. By the 3rd, ice-crusted edges of the central crater, steam roiling only where midday sun warmed buried glass. Teams under Gendry's direction built wooden derricks to lift massive blocks, clearing paths for carts ferrying wounded to makeshift infirmaries. The God's Wood became a triage center, between trunks, cots lined in ring, healers moving from one to next. Bran oversaw from his moss throne, but sometimes vanished, eyes rolling white as he slipped into ward dreams to track hunting parties or watch skies for threats. Arya organized scouting bands to sweep the outer field. Without the Night King's will, thousands of dead lay inert, some partially burned, others frozen where they fell. She insisted they be burned all the same. Winter scavengers would not feast on unholy flesh. Pyres dotted moors, their smoke thin compared to WILDFIRE's earlier pillars, but each column marked closure for those who still feared corpses might rise again. Ghost reappeared on the morning of the third day, half his white fur singed, but he loped across snow to nuzzle John's hand. Tormund walked in his wake with handful of wildling warriors who had survived the outer trenches. They greeted John with battered laughter, proud to see he still breathed. Tormund promised to guide any free folk south of the wall to new shelters, the wall itself broken and haunted no longer. Meanwhile, deep beneath the collapsed grain cellars, Tyrion supervised a dig. Iron winches and cage lanterns lit tunnels carved anew through debris. Each yard advanced slower than the last. By midday of the fourth, they reached a chamber whose walls glittered with molten glass. In the center sat a single bronze-bound cask, surface glowing faintly emerald, intact amidst slag. Tyrion exhaled, sweat tracing dusty furrows on his cheek. No one touched the cask. They built an iron sling around it, padded with layers of wet clay, then hoisted it inch by inch through a zigzag of reinforced shafts until the cask emerged on the courtyard edge at twilight. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Bran, Arya, Sam, Grey Worm, and Davos assembled in half-circle. Wind cut across ruins, carrying ash odor yet. Drogon's silhouette loomed beyond. Bran's ravens perched along broken crenels, watching. "This is what is left," Tyrion announced, voice small. "The last dragon's breath of mad kings." Jon stepped forward. Flames from nearby braziers turned the cask's emerald sheen into shimmering sea light. He knelt, pressing frost-numbed palm against metal. It radiated gentle warmth, as if a heartbeat inside admitted his presence. Daenerys moved to his side. "I can taste it," she murmured. "Like my father's last whisper." Sansa hugged Cloak tighter. "We can't keep it here. Not where children play." Jon nodded. "We have two choices. We bury it beyond the wall under frozen sea, or we destroy it now." "Destroy it how?" Sam asked, pushing spectacles up soot-smeared nose. "If it's detonated here, Winterfell's remains vanish." Tyrion rubbed beard. "Far out on the shivering sea, a dragon could drop it into the deep where cold and pressure." Bran interrupted, voice soft but sharp. "Cold will preserve its alchemy for generations. In time, ice may loosen seal." He turned unblinking eyes to Daenerys. "Only dragon fire born of true life can unbind it completely." Daenerys looked to her larger dragon. "Then Drogon can end it." Jon felt a thrum inside cask, as though aware. "But it may explode if heated too quickly," he cautioned. Tyrion nodded. "We create a trench, bury cask partly under stone, let Drogon's flame burn slow from distance. Heat cracks glass, release gas gradually. Air burns off at surface. No massive blast. No burial," Bran countered. "Stone would focus pressure." He gestured to Heart Tree. "Let it meet open sky. Fire will climb, but there is nothing left here to ignite, only glass." Sansa bit lip. "Nothing except us. We can watch from the ridgeline," Arya said. "I'll guide folk back after Blaze dies." Decision made. They spent the night clearing a safe bowl atop the central crater, now mostly glassy slag. At dawn of Council Day, survivors gathered on Western Ridge, overlooking ruin. Bundled in furs, faces lit by pale gold sunrise. Snowflakes drifted lazy spirals, while orange halos crowned each breath. Jon and Daenerys rode up ahead, cask balanced on small sled between them. Drogon perched on ridge crest away from watchers, eyes burning coals. Jon met Daenerys' gaze. "You're sure?" She touched his cheek gently, then dismounted, strode to Drogon's talon. The dragon rumbled as she spoke, Valyrian phrases meant only for him. He lowered neck. She swung onto saddleless shoulders, hair whipping in wind. Jon cut the sled rope and shoved the cask onto angled ramp, where it slid clinking into crater's center, resting amid cracked obsidian. Drogon lifted off with thunder of wings, circling wide arc so tailwinds did not lash onlookers. At her command he hovered, chest glands glowing. A jet of amber-red flame poured down, converging upon cask in steady stream. Heat waves shimmered, glass beneath softening to orange puddle. Cask's bronze bands blackened, buckled, faint cracks traced emerald shell. Gas vented in bright tongues, miniature green serpents that writhed then vanished under Drogon's constant fire. Minutes stretched. People watched in rapt silence, a congregation at some strange funeral pyre. Bran's ravens wheeled overhead like dark confetti. Then a low boom rolled, not sharp but deep, as though a giant drum struck beneath their feet. Flame spouted higher, but no shockwave blasted outward. Instead, wildfire unspooled in luminous column, climbing straight to sky where it met falling snow. Flurries flashed to steam, forming halo of incandescent mist, reminiscent of an otherworldly tree. Leaves of vapor fanned outward, glimmering blues and greens before dissipating. When the last of the flame guttered, Drogon ceased breath, banked away. The crater now was a smooth, cooling basin of onyx, with no cask, no ember, just faint ripples where glass flowed during inferno. The last wildfire heartbeat had ascended to heavens and dispersed. Daenerys landed beside Jon. She slid to ground, legs trembling slightly. "It's done," he whispered. She leaned into him, exhale shuddering. Father's last weapon, gone. A distant horn sounded, riders approaching along King's Road. Council guests. Duty pulled them apart. Yet in her eyes, Jon saw gratitude, and he realized a weight older than her had lifted. Riders arrived by midday. Lord Glover from Deepwood, Lady Mormont's steward, bearing her banner black-winged and green. Jan Royce for the Vale. Galbart Glover for House Reed. Lord Wyman Manderley's nephew. Sir Marlon, representing White Harbor. Mage and Daisy Mormont, on borrowed horses. Even Queen Asha Greyjoy, hair stiff with rime, sails of her modest long They dismounted under archway of broken gatehouse, eyes widening at devastation. And at dragons perched like statues along walls. The council convened in what remained of the great hall, one transverse nave with intact roof. Fires roared in portable braziers. Court tables salvaged from storehouse formed circle around stone map Tyrion had etched with chalk. At high seat, Bran sat with Sansa at right, Jon at left. Daenerys allowed Kuhono of Dothraki to stand behind her, but otherwise came unarmed. Talk began with silent reckoning of faces lost. Lord Umber's line ended at last hearth. Lady Lyanna Mormont's bravery relayed by Steward. The Dothraki blood riders trampled but honored. The Karstarks, whose home burned. The free folk chieftains. Each name spoke felt like tapestry thread cut. Then, business. Food? House Manderley promised ships loaded with grain from Sister's Harvest. Shipbuilders from House Glover offered to fell oaks at Deepwood to repair northern keeps. The Vale would send stone masons, rivermen wagons with fresh leather. But undercurrents flowed. Who ruled north? Would King's Landing bend knee to Targaryen queen? Rumor of Cersei, still clinging to Red, keep circulated. Some lords eyed Daenerys with suspicion. Jon spoke, recounting battle, praising unsullied courage and dragon's sacrifice. He described Daenerys' pledge to help rebuild and to rule with counsel from northern houses. Sansa followed with measured words, gratitude for dragonfire that saved Winterfell. reminder that independence meant choice, not isolation. She suggested a 10-year compact. North retains self-governance under Stark, but swears friendship and mutual defense with Dragon Queen. Daenerys accepted with nod, surprising some. Tyrion rose to propose a broader summit at Riverlands, come spring. Lords of all 6, and perhaps 7, kingdoms to redraw lines of power after undead war. That conversation seeded hope of lasting truce. As dusk painted hall in tiger stripes of firelight and shadow, Bran leaned forward, his thin hand steady on staff. Tonight we feast not to celebrate victory, but to honor survival, he said. For tomorrow, our labors begin. He looked to Jon. We call ghosts home to rest. Feast supplies were scant, smoked venison, hardtack, onions, few casks of dark ale discovered unbroken. Yet flavors tasted richer for scarcity. Long tables arranged under torn banners. Survivors shared benches regardless of banner color. Torment told amused children how giants rode mammoths across Night King's army. Gendry hammered makeshift cups from scrap metal as gifts. Brienne, arm and sling, laughed at Jaime's attempt to carve with left hand. Davos found Jon near Hareth. You saved me under that beam, the older man said quietly. Debt I can't repay. Jon shook his head. You've guided me every step. Davos raised mug. To those who stand between fire and ice, they drank. Across shadows, Arya leaned against wall, scanning room. She caught Jon's eye, lifted brow in unspoken question. Do we trust? Jon nodded slightly, and she eased. Daenerys approached with goblet of watered wine. They wandered to broken archway facing night sky. Cold air swept embers behind them. Above, aurora ribbons still flickered faint, remnant of wildfire plankton drifting in stratosphere, green curtains rippling across stars. Beautiful, she whispered. Terrible too, he said. Terrible things often birth beauty, she replied, looking at him. Like dragons from ashes. He touched her fingers. But beauty must be tended. She smiled. Then tend with me. Words hung suspended. Jon breathed in smell of her braids, taste of smoke on lips not yet met. Footsteps interrupted. Tyrion with urgent face. Forgive intrusion, he said. But riders from south approach, Lannister colors under white flag. Jon stiffened. Another envoy? Perhaps, Tyrion said, eyes uneasy. Sir Bronn leads them. Daenerys set goblet down. We'll greet at once. They descended rubble slope, accompanied by Grey Worm and Davos. Torch lines bobbed along old causeway as a dozen horsemen advanced. At front rode Bronn, cloak singed at hem, crossbow slung but uncocked. He reined to halt, raised hand. I come with letters bearing the hand's seal. He dismounted, produced scroll. Tyrion accepted, eyes scanning wax stamp. Lion encircled by 7-point star. Jon saw his half-brother blanch. What is it? Red seal means Queen herself penned, Tyrion murmured. He broke it, read silently. After long moment, he exhaled. Cersei offers parley. In exchange for safe passage, she promises release of Stormland's levies, still under Lannister guard and wheat stores at Crownlands. She requests meeting at Harrenhal when roads thaw. He looked up. And she requests proof the Dragon Queen still lives, meaning she believes rumors of our destruction. Daenerys folded arms. She will lure us, attempt poison or trap. Perhaps, Tyrion said, but refusing may spur her to march north with what remains of Golden Company. Jon turned to Bran, who had rolled into scene on wheeled chair pushed by Mira. Bran's eyes were distant, but focused on parchment. Harrenhal stands at center of Riverlands, Bran said. Many will watch meeting. Lies cannot hide in plain sight. Sansa stepped forward. If we negotiate publicly, other lords will judge who seeks peace. Jon looked to Daenerys. She tilted chin. Then we accept, but we dictate terms. Neutral host. Each side brings minimal guard. Dragons remain distant until called. Tyrion nodded, scribbled response on fresh parchment, sealed with joint sigils. Bronn accepted grudgingly, then glanced at broken walls. 7 hells, he muttered. Heard stories, didn't expect bloody ruins. He kicked stone. Well, your lot still breathing. Good for debts owed. He remounted, saluted Tyrion with sarcastic flourish, and rode away into night. Jon exhaled. Harrenhal, come spring, another battlefield or peace table. Daenerys met his eyes. Let's make it peace. Snow fell heavier each day, but repairs advanced. Rhaegal healed slowly. By second week, he stagger flew short bursts, enough to lift timber for cranes. Drogon hauled massive rubble, clear with chains attached to harness. Wildlings and Unsullied worked side by side under Gendry's barked orders. Free folk hammered stone with Osha's smiths, singing rowdy songs. Children sled on ash dunes, laughter echoing where sorrow reigned days past. In evenings, Sansa and Daenerys pored over ledgers, grain needed per mouth, seeds for planting, spare leather for boots. Sansa's quills scratched figures long after torches gutted. Daenerys learned North ledger marks for bushels and mead tons. Tyrion schemed trade routes bypassing downed bridges, promising loans from Iron Bank using dragon-forged coin, minted at White Harbor. One dawn, Jon joined Torment, Sam, and Edison Tollett on knoll beyond Western Wood. They stood before small cairns. Jon knelt at Lyanna Mormont's mound, laid direwolf-carved idol. Sam placed copy of Night's Watch oath at Dolorous Ed's grave. Tormund poured sour goat milk over fallen giants' bones, shouting curse at snow gods. Then they burned spruce branches in pit, smoke rising straight into still air. It felt like funeral for entire age. That night, Bran summoned council to Godswood. Aurora again shimmered overhead, but now no green, only faint pink and violet. Bran spoke. The wheel convulsed and cracked, but it turned still. The story does not end at Winterfell. South, Queen on Red Keep plots. East, storms gather across narrow sea. North, the wall broken invites curious minds. If old wounds close slowly, new ones may open. We must shape this age, or ghosts will shape it for us. He raised staff. Roots underfoot pulsed faint white. I named Jon Aegon Targaryen, blood of ice and fire, as bridge between realms. Let him travel with Queen southward to Harrenhal. I remain in north to weave memories into new walls. Sansa will rule as Lady Protector in my stead until my strength return. Nassim Beshi. Sansa's eyes widened, but she bowed head. Jon opened mouth to protest, but Bran shook head gently. You swore to God living. That duty now calls south. Arya laid hand on Jon's shoulder. We'll keep the north. Davos cleaned up and, leaning on New Cain, said, I'll sail ahead to treat with river lords, pave safe harbor. Plans spun forth. Grey Worm proposed unsullied escort of 100. Tyrion suggested ravens to Dorne for alliance. Rhaegal, still healing, would rest at Moat Cailin with small garrison, where swamp mists hid him from sellsword archers. Weeks passed. Snow packed high along King's Road, but thawed midday under lengthening sunlight. Reconstruction of Winterfell's inner wall neared shoulder height. Glass crater cooled enough to touch. Children skipped stones that skated across glossy surface, singing crystalline notes. Day before departure, Jon walked rampart with Sansa. Wind tugged his cloak. She wore pale gray wolf fur, new clasp shaped as budding heart tree leaf. "Keep them honest," he said. "The veil may covet 10 towers." She smirked. "You keep her honest." Then seriousness. "I trust you, John, but hearts of men in South twist quickly. Take Godswood's memory with you." She pressed small bundle. A sprig of heart tree bark bound with red thread. He placed it under tunic. "I'll return." He scanned horizon, white forests, curling smoke from cabins, dragons silhouetted on distant tower. "This is home." "Home," she echoed. They embraced long, then parted. Dawn of departure broke clear. Snow crusted, but sky shone cobalt. 2 columns assembled, Unsullied and Northguard, flanking supply wagons. Tyrion rode donkey with saddle cushioned by hand-stitched pillows. Davos led small cart full of scrolls. Sam accompanied to Old Town, hoping to secure archives for rebuilding. Daenerys mounted white mare. Drogon soared overhead, casting huge shadow down road. Jon climbed onto shaggy northern destrier. Ghost trotted aside. They passed through rebuilt gate, 2 half-towers still scaffolded but arch complete. People of Winterfell lined path, wildlings, crofters, smiths, children, waving cloth strips, dyed half green, half white, colors of new compact. Jon looked back once. Bran raised hand from Godswood, ravens bursting behind like rising thoughts. Sansa beside him, Arya perched atop wall, hood low, but her grin bright. Whips cracked, wheels churned. The caravan rolled south, leaving behind steam that still coiled from hidden fractures, but now smelled only of wet stone and pine. And high above, a dragon's cry rang across shrinking fields, carrying promise brighter than any flame, that ashes might seed tomorrow's forests, that winter's grave might nurse spring. 3 nights on road brought them to Last River, where ice flows crushed beneath bridge pylons. They camped on southern bank. Fires popped. Warriors sighed into mugs. Jon took first watch, pacing ridge, overlooking frozen rush. Torches painted moving shadows. He thought of Harrenhal's broken towers waiting like black teeth. Footfall behind. Daenerys joined, cloak shimmering with tiny glass beads Sam had found in crater and sewn into pattern of 3 swirling dragons. Symbols reborn from WILDFIRE glass. "You carry weight again," she said. "Memories," he answered. He pointed skyward. Constellation called the Ice Wolf shimmered. Ancestors watching. She entwined fingers with his, and judging, maybe guiding. He faced her. "We'll face Cersei's snares, but if we stand firm..." "We will," she said, voice steel soft. Then she kissed him, slow, deliberate, the aroma of pine resin on her lips. When they parted, Jon felt balance inside, not terror of fire, nor dread of ice, but quiet blend. Drums of night, forests settled. Wind hissed through black pines, but no white stirred, no wild flame flared. And when he closed eyes, he saw Winterfell not as ruin, but as saplings sprouting in crater, leaves red as hope against morning snow. The wheel kept turning, but now hands pushed from both sides, cautious but united, guiding spokes toward path neither tyranny nor oblivion. Somewhere back north, heart tree bled sap that glowed faint ember under moon. A reminder that stories never truly end. They only grow deeper roots. And southward, across miles of silenced battlefields, a queen in red castle drummed, fingers on marble armrest, plotting. But dawn horses galloped to carry new tales. Dragons cast shadows of living flame, and ghost wolves howled into daybreak, heralding age beyond prophecy. Jon tightened cloak, lifted gaze east, and whispered into cold, "Let them come. We'll meet them in light." "No, she said. Snowflakes drifted as silence answered. a silence filled with heartbeat of a world reborn.